time's up?
Yeah. I wasn't sure that I wanted to ask this question. And I, to be honest, was okay if I never had the answer until I reemerge into non-physical.
All right, then we're done.
But since I'm here and you called me, I might as well. I'm hoping that you can help me a little draw this out. Yeah. And I don't know if I have to give you permission to probe what I'm trying to say. I had an experience in 2003, and we've had some experience, some people explaining some experiences they had, but this was off the charts. It was terrifying. And I don't know how to explain it. I think you'll understand, Esther will understand, and all I guess I can explain it to be is like a channeling experience that went horribly wrong.
Continue.
I don't know why I don't know what it was really. I know what it was really in a way, but I don't know why it had to be so terrifying.
Well,
and I don't know exactly who and what it was.
Well, let us give you some understanding of this, and all of this will come into perfect clarity for you. We want to begin by saying to you, to all of you, that every thought that has ever been thought still exists, that there are vibrational rivers and pools and streams of thought currents. And it makes up the variety and the contrast that we all have to choose from. So to explain, Esther and Jerry, neither one of them ever liked the word channeling very much, because as they heard different people describing their experience, it was most often not the experience that they were having. And so they were uncomfortable with being thrown into a category that was so different. But we want to explain that when you think about momentums, and when you think about streams of consciousness, and you think about tapping in to a stream of consciousness in a sort of open ability to translate, the questions that came before yours lay a perfect groundwork for this, because we have established that it is a vibrational world mostly that you live in, and that depending upon what frequency you've established, and it doesn't even matter so much how you've come to establish it, it gives you access to either things that are inside the vortex or things that are outside of the vortex. So as you're moving through life, you develop these patterns of thoughts or beliefs. And a belief is just a thought you keep thinking. And so rather than using the word beliefs, we like to use the word practiced thoughts or practiced vibrations. And the subject grid helps us to talk about that in an even more defined way, because without even knowing it, you've got these grids that are established, and then things fill in your grid. So if you have heard about things that you might be afraid of, and you've focused upon them in a way that when you think about them, you are afraid of them, then you can establish a vibrational patterning that makes it even more likely for you to experience it. We want you to understand that we've said to people in a sort of humorous way to try to loosen them up and lighten them up a little bit. They'll say, I'm receiving this voice, and it is a sort of demanding voice that is telling me to do things that I don't want to do. And we said, that's not your inner being. You've got your mother going on here. And it's not, and we're not really kidding that much, because the patterns that you've developed in terms of your vibration come from the things that you've been observing around you. So if you just acknowledge that in the same way that you can tune your television set by pushing the buttons to different frequencies, and you can see something lovely like streams flowing, or something horrible like something that Steven Spielberg has put together, there are all kinds of experiences that you can have as you tune into different frequencies, and you are not different as a tuner, receiver, transmitter, receiver either. So if you just put it into that category, and then you ask yourself, what's the frequency that I've got going on? We want you to understand that there isn't anything for you to be afraid of, because nothing can assert itself into your experience. Everything comes by vibrational invitation. And so while it may seem helpful for you to figure out what was going on that caused you to get a vibration activated that you didn't want to have activated, or that you didn't like as the grid filled in, there are all kinds of things that people practice in terms of thought, and they don't even realize that they really don't want it because they are willing to put up with negative emotion. Negative emotion has not come to bother most people that much. You're willing to put up with negative emotion until a manifestation occurs that goes beyond it. And then you say, how did I get this? And we say, you get anything unwanted by allowing a vibrational frequency that you are either ignoring or enduring. Anytime you are enduring a negative frequency and not doing something about it, don't worry, it will become more. So once you understand that, then you feel sort of free to move through your experience. So let's take the example of Esther receiving Abraham. Now we want to talk about this in terms of the grid, because this is the easiest way for you to understand this. So as Esther is meditating, she sat with Jerry for about 9 months in 1984, sat to meditate, and they meditated every day for about 15 minutes. And she discovered through practice that if she would just focus on her breathing, that she could establish this sort of detached state. She kind of liked it. It was sort of like floating, where she couldn't tell her nose from her foot. And so in this sort of disassociated state of sort of pleasant disassociation with what was going on in the room around her, she didn't really realize it, but she was, in the absence of resistance, allowing her frequency to shift to the frequency of that which is us. So in today's terms, and we mean specifically today's terms, we would say her meditation caused her to create a grid of non-resistance, which allowed her to connect with the core grid of who she is. And then that grid began filling in. At first, she was moving her head during meditation. It was like her nose spelling letters on a blackboard. Later on, it filled in with a feeling of energy in her arms, and she was already very fast at typing, but she was able to feel words, thoughts forming. We explained to her later that we were offering blocks of thought that at an unconscious level she was translating. But the thing that we most want you to hear is that she had established a grid that made her able to receive those particular blocks of thought. And really, we want to say to you, it's a good thing when you are able to, at an unconscious level, receive those blocks of thought. And it doesn't really matter very much. Really, it doesn't matter very much. Really. It doesn't matter very much whether you're receiving the blocks of thought from inside your grid or from outside your grid, any more than it matters very much if you pick up a book that makes you smile when you read it or makes you hide in the closet when you read it. In other words, there's all kinds of things that you could read, and when you read them, you're going to have different emotional responses to them. And we want you to put this into the same category. In other words, you are a sentient being. You can feel vibration, you can tune to frequencies, you can translate blocks of thought, and it doesn't matter very much in this initial conversation where the blocks of thought are coming from. You're able to translate the blocks of thought. It's just important now, after the grid has filled in and you got to look at what it was and how it felt, that you want to identify that you want to be of a different vibrational frequency. You see what we're getting at? All is really well. That we want you to understand that there is no assertion. Nothing can jump into your experience, but there are all kinds of things that are going on in your world, in your manifested world and in your not manifested world. Our friend is talking about deja vu. That's sort of weird in and of itself because it's something that's not yet manifested. The physical world wants to, for the most part, only give credit to things that manifest, that everybody can witness, that everybody can give affirmation. Yes, I see that. And yet in this incredibly diverse world, there are all kinds of manifestations that you don't want to experience. Just like there are all kinds of manifestations that you do want to experience. And so this conversation is singularly about focus. It's about focusing your vibrational frequency into the patterning or into the grid that allows it then to fill in with things that are satisfying to you when it does fill in. Yes.
Okay, so what exactly was it that I let into my grid? Because it was extreme.
Well,
it
you
was
see,
extreme.
Well, but let us say to you, every time, let's start again with the powerful, important point that every thought that has ever been thought still exists. So every time someone felt frightened, every time someone felt desperate, here's the best way.
Because I hadn't been thinking of these things, and maybe they were unconscious, but initially the way it opened.
Hear this. So we were visiting with a woman one day several years ago who lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. And she said, Abraham, I've been driving across these bay bridges for years. And last week I drove across one and I was terrified. She said, I thought I was going to have to lay on the floorboards of my car. She said, what came over me? She said, I couldn't even stand to be in my car on the bridge. And we said, well, you've bumped into some thought forms. Well, she didn't like that idea. That felt like something out there that could get her. She said, what do you mean? And we said, well, people go across the bridge. Sometimes they're exhilarated by what they see, but there'd been an earthquake there not long before, and some of the bridges had fallen down, and some cars had been crushed, and many people had been killed in the process. And we said, now, as people are going across these bridges, there is plenty of trepidation that is happening, quite a bit more than usual. It's accentuated right now. So we said, you're bumping into thought forms, and something that's going on in your vibration is causing you to harmonize with them. That's the most important question. What's going on with you that might make you harmonize more than ever before with these thought forms? She knew immediately. She said, my neighbor was burglarized. And I've been attending these neighborhood meetings where we're trying to decide if we're going to get a patrolman, or whether we're going to put bars on our windows. What are we going to do to protect ourselves from this burglary? And so we said, do you see what happened? The burglary caused a vulnerability to be activated within you that has not been active within you before. And now, with that vulnerability activated within you, as you go across the bridge, you're rendezvousing with things that you have not rendezvoused with before. And so it's all right to just leave it there. Don't try to get to the bottom of what was going on, because there is no bottom. All you would do is activate this unwanted thing. It's enough to say, I have the ability to translate vibration. Everybody does. You're very intense in the way you think. You are like a dog on a bone. When you get hold of a thought, you follow it out, and you follow it out, and you follow it out, and you follow it out. And if it is a thought that is life-giving, if it is a thought that is in alignment with who you really are, then you thrive. But if it is a worrisome thought, then you just accentuate that, and you get more and more of that going on, until eventually you had an experience that, because of your ability to translate vibration, that was unsettling to you. If we were standing in your physical shoes, we wouldn't talk about it again. We would acknowledge it as something unwanted. We would acknowledge that there must have been something acting in my vibration, or I couldn't have had the experience. We would say the same thing that we would say to anyone who has any kind of a manifestation that is not pleasing to them about anything. Don't want to do that anymore. So what are the requirements to not repeat something unwanted? Well, don't do the things that led up to it, which is sort of what makes you want to ask, well, what were you doing that led up to it? And we say, never mind what led up to what you don't want. Actively do things that lead up to what you do want. That's all. Actively do things that lead up to what you do want. You are a pure positive energy being. In fact, we've never met anyone who wanted more to be in the vibration of well-being. But you know what? Every vibration has an equal and opposite vibration. It's a wave. And when you really, really want one thing, you really, really don't want another thing. And very often, in quest for goodness, in a quest for alignment, in a quest for goodness, in a quest for being in alignment with that which you consider to be good, without even knowing it, you've got a vibration going on about the absence of that. It's like somebody wanting money and worrying about not having enough, and thinking that they're talking about it in a positive way because they're smiling when they say it, even though what they're feeling is something very different from that, you see. So don't worry about it. Don't replay it in your mind. Don't worry about it happening again.
Don't.
Very good. We enjoyed the interaction.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.